Election day in Haiti. Will Haitians be able to cast their ballots without violence at the polls? Calvin Hughes is in Port-au-Prince with a live report. Questions need to be answered about how and why Corey Smith was killed. Shot to death by a Palm Beach Gardens police officer. We will speak exclusively with defense attorney Benjamin Crump. And Donald Trump comes to town and stirs it up. He does that so well. How was his anti-immigrant messages received in immigrant-rich South Florida? We'll have a report. Good morning. Glad you could join us on this beautiful Sunday morning. Glenna is away. We will hear shortly from attorney Benjamin Crump. He represents the family of Corey Jones, the drummer who was shot to death in Palm Beach Gardens 1 week ago tonight. Crump has new facts and new theories about this troubling case. Stay tuned for that. But first, to Haiti, where my colleague Calvin Hughes, who has been there often, is back to cover the elections underway today. Calvin, good morning. Bonjour. As we know, the first round of elections were plagued by violence. How's it going today?
Michael, bonjour. The polls have been open now for about 5 hours, and while it is generally safe to go to the polls here, we understand that there has been at least 2 arrests in Gonaïves, which is in northern Haiti. One person tried to vote more than once, so once again, that's breaking news that we're going to be following for the rest of the day. But I want to show you now some new video that we just got in of President Martelly heading to the polls today here in Port-au-Prince. You will see him there surrounded by a number of people heading to the voting center there, just trying to show people how safe it is to vote here. He himself really wants to get the message out that, you know, there will be no violence today at the polls, and police are out too in very large numbers. And if you can't believe this, they also have drones here overhead to make sure that there is no violence. So the government is watching very closely as to what is going to happen here today. And I had a chance to talk with President Martelly yesterday at his home for about 2 hours. And here's what he said about security at the voting places all around the country.
It's very difficult to guarantee that we won't have one incident, you know, but we are serious about telling you that we have taken every single step necessary. As far as we're concerned, we did 100% of what we're supposed to do. Now the rest is how on election day the police will react.
Now, Michael, there is a U.S. delegation here with Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, as we know, from Miami, and also Congressman John Conyers from Michigan. Both are here to monitor the presidential elections today. We had a chance to catch up with her just moments ago, and here's what she's found so far out at some of the voting places.
Who is actually voting and how, and the whole process of the lines. And we see empty balloting places, but we see long lines. So I have a concern about who are they allowing to vote and why is it so slow. So that's why I'm trying to get to the bottom of this now.
So, Michael, as we know, Haiti is a very young democracy, having only elected 3 presidents democratically here. You covered the very first one with President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. So we know that there are likely going to be problems here. The question is, will there be violence at the polls?
Well, we certainly hope that there is not violence. And you're right, I was there when Jean-Bertrand Aristide was elected after the Duvalier regime ended and Baby Doc fled the country. Calvin, in that election, I believe, I recall, about 90% of eligible voters in Haiti voted that first time. They were just overjoyed to have democracy and be able to choose a leader. I think I share the concern with you and Frederica Wilson. The video you just showed, not many people out at the polls.
Well, what's interesting is that, you know, the election day here in Haiti is held on a Sunday where they are really trying to maximize the vote here versus having it on a Tuesday when obviously people have to choose between sometimes working and trying to leave work early and having a number of issues, as we know, back in America. But in August, there was so much fear and intimidation at the polls that only 18% of the population turned out. And here in Haiti, out of a population of 11 million people, about 6 million people are registered to vote. So the question is, how many people will come out? And and how will they vote? There are 54 candidates in the race. Will they vote with their head or will they vote with their heart? And the question is, you know, we have asked so many people that question, will they vote with their heart? And more than likely, they will.
And if you would, Calvin, explain, I think people would be in the South Florida and the States would be fascinated, the ballot in Haiti, because there are many people who are illiterate. The ballot, the presidential and congressional ballots, local races, have photographs of the candidates so that people can take their fingerprint, is the way they used to do it, and dip it in ink and put it on the face or by the face of the candidate whom they support. But it seems to work.
Michael, that hasn't changed. I mean, in fact, they also have voting cards now, and they have, after they cast their ballot, their fingers are inked. And so that is a way for the voting centers to know that someone is not trying to vote more than once here. So yes, there are pictures on the ballots, and there are 54 candidates. And keep in mind, for this election, too, for the second round of elections, this is also for 86 seats in the lower chamber, as well as 144 municipal seats, mainly for the mayorships of many of the towns here across the country as well. So there is a lot on the ballot to choose from. So, you know, it can be confusing for a lot of people, but I did ask that question about the number of uneducated people to the person who is over the Elections Commission here. He said that should not be a factor because someone can choose to get some help before they go behind the curtain or before they cast their ballot.
We understand. And Calvin, just finally, there will be a runoff election in late December if no candidate for president receives a majority vote. Is that right?
Yeah, they expect for the final results to come back on November 3rd, but if in fact there is a runoff, which we understand this race may come down between Moise Jean-Charles, who is the candidate for President Aristide, who made a rare appearance in Cité Soleil on Friday night. Also, President Martelly's candidate is Jovenel Moise, the farmer turned multimillionaire who has done very well. He is called the Banana Man because he has made a bunch of money exporting bananas here from the country. And then there's Jude Celestine, the construction worker who has done pretty well, a successful businessman. So the race should come down between those three, even though there are 54 candidates. So, you know, the question is that will there be a runoff? And if in fact there is going to be, that'll happen on December 27th. And the president should take office on February 7th of next year. And President Martelly, even though his term doesn't actually end in May of 2016, he says he's willing to give up power and to restore things back to order so that the presidential tracks or terms can be back to the 5-year terms as they should be. Right. And one of the reasons why he took office so late and the election had to be pushed back was because of the earthquake back in 2010.
Which you covered so well, and we're glad to see you back again reporting for Local 10 from Port-au-Prince. My friend and colleague Calvin Hughes. Calvin, have a great day, and we'll look forward to your reports this evening.
Merci beaucoup.
Pas de quoi. All right, up next, an exclusive interview with attorney Benjamin Crump. He represents the family of Corey Jones, gunned down by an undercover police officer 1 week ago tonight. So the long list of young black men who have lost their lives under questionable circumstances in the last 18 months, we can now add the name Corey Jones. His car broke down early last Sunday morning in Palm Beach Gardens. He pulled off I-95 at an exit ramp and was waiting for a tow truck when an undercover police officer pulled up to check things out. Now, we don't know what happened next, but we do know that Corey Jones was shot and killed by that officer, Numan Raja. On Friday night, after an emotional town hall meeting, I sat down with Benjamin Crump to talk about the death of Corey Jones.
Mr. Crump, pleasure to be able to speak with you.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.
The death of Corey Jones, was this a tragic misunderstanding? Was it negligence? Was it criminal? What was it?
Right now, the family knows this, Michael, that Corey was on the side of the road waiting for the tow truck. Corey did nothing that we know of to be illegal. He needed the police to offer him a helping hand. Instead, he got bullets. And to that end, none of it makes sense to them. They don't know the answers yet. None of us know the answers yet. But what we do know is that we have to get to those answers, and it has to be transparent so we can have trust that Corey Jones' death will not be swept under the rug like so many others have been.
The FBI now is going to join the investigation. Is that a good thing?
Well, I think the more people looking at it, the more eyes we have on it is always a good thing. Transparency is very important. And oftentimes in these matters, you see people in the system try to attack the victim, the person who is dead. What his family wants, what this community wants, is this to be investigated thoroughly, for the kill of Corey Jones to be investigated thoroughly, and if he used excessive force, they want him to be held accountable. If that was your family member, wouldn't you want the same exact thing that the family members of Corey Jones wants?
You have met, you and your partner Darrell Parks and perhaps others, you went and met with Dave Arenberg, the Palm Beach County State Attorney, and he told you things which heretofore had not been made public. What was the most important thing he told you?
Well, I think the most important thing that he told us was the fact that Corey Jones never fired his weapon. The fact that the police officer fired 6 shots at Corey Jones, 3 of them hitting his body.
But the body, excuse me, the body was found 80 to 100 feet from the scene of the shooting. How do you explain that, or how did he explain that?
It is very troubling, Michael, that his body was found some 80 to 100 feet away from his automobile. And it's really troubling because we know at some point Corey was running away. And it really brings
Do you think he had been shot when he was running away?
Well, we don't know, but it was something that took place that had Corey to be retreating. And it's very troubling that this whole thing is very troubling when you think about a plainclothes officer comes up on you at 3 o'clock in the morning on the side of the road in an unmarked van, gets out t-shirt, jeans, a cap, and approaches you. How would you feel? What would you think? And doesn't show the badge? And I believe, as his family members believe, that Corey would have never attacked a police officer. Nothing in his character, nothing in his history says that.
He did have a gun with him, which he had bought legally 3 days before. He had a concealed weapons permit. Why did he have a gun?
Whereas he told his siblings, his sister and brother, he had purchased a gun, and it wasn't just 3 days ago. He had a concealed weapons permit before that. That was his gun that he had just got. But he had told them that we all have to be responsible. I have all this musician equipment. We travel all over the South playing gigs, and I have money, and so I want to make sure I'm protecting myself. So he went and got all his things done appropriately. He was licensed to have the gun. He had a concealed weapons permit. He did everything that an American citizen would have the right to do to avail themselves of the constitutional privilege of the Second Amendment. So why is it any different when Corey Jones has a gun for protection and says that he has a right to defend himself than others? Florida
has a policeman's Bill of Rights, which protects them against giving self-incriminating statements. But this policeman, Newman Raja, has given a statement to investigators. Does that give you some hope that you may find out the truth of what happened?
I understand in Palm Beach County that they have a policy that's unique here, that's not shared by many in the state, that their officers have a choice to give a statement in order to try to avoid having to have it go before a grand jury. So I don't know that process, but I know a statement was given. I can't speak to that issue.
As an experienced attorney who tragically has handled previous similar cases, Trayvon Martin among them, you know that it's very rare for a prosecutor to take a case where a policeman has shot someone to a grand jury seeking an indictment. Did Dave Arenberg give you any indication that if the facts warrant it, that he would do that?
His office said that they were going to investigate and get the answers, and they were going to determine if it was a criminal act that occurred, and if so, that they would follow the law. And that's all we want to happen. That's all our community wants. We want equal justice. We don't want you all to think that we want something special. We just want equal justice. We want the same thing for our children in our community that anybody else wants for their children in their community. Nothing more, nothing less. And so when we talked to David and Erin Barrett, and the family was very vocal, they said they just want justice. And what justice is going to be based on the facts and the truth of what happened that night, because what they know without a shadow of a doubt is that Corey should not be dead.
Finally, I need to ask you, you have been in this situation before. Black families across this country have been in a situation where their loved one has been shot by a police officer, often under questionable circumstances. Why does this go on?
Before I answer that question, I do want to specifically say about the Corey Jones case. It really forces us to look at police policies and police training and police procedures, especially with plainclothes officers and unmarked vehicles. You know, in South Florida, you have seen in the past that there have been people impersonating police officers. So I don't know the entire policy of the Palm Beach Gardens Police Department, but I doubt very seriously they have a policy in there that says you can approach a citizen in plain clothes and not give identification and expect the citizen to acquiesce to your authority. You know, what protects the public in that scenario? And when you really think about it, Corey Jones, we believe, didn't know if he was about to be mugged or robbed or murdered. You had somebody in a van pull up on you at 3 o'clock in the morning, and look at the photograph of how he pulled up on Corey. That didn't seem like a police procedure. So it's these things that cry out to be looked at thoroughly and find out what other policies were violated that night that led to Corey's death.
Like running the plate on the vehicle, or communicating on a two-way radio or a cell phone?
Or calling for a marked car to come and investigate it, so the person who's on the side of the road would know that this is a police officer, somebody here to assist me, versus somebody who I don't know, this stranger in a van who's approaching me. Is he gonna kill me? Is he gonna rob me? What is he gonna do? Corey went to his grave, we suspect, trying to figure it out. And we know at some point he's running from the person.
Now to the question about the terrible repetitiveness of seeing black men, young black men particularly, being gunned down in circumstances that are often questionable.
It is very troubling when you have the people who are supposed to protect and serve you killing these young people of color, and there never been anybody held accountable, because you say, where's the deterrent in it, preventing it from happening again, and preventing your child from becoming a hashtag, and preventing your husband or your brother, your sister, because really it's about preventing these things. We don't want to keep having to meet like this and talk like this, because that means there's a hole in some family's heart that even if the officer is held accountable, even if there's a civil recovery, that doesn't repair the loss. That hole will forever be there. And so we're crying out to the community to say, we're not going to allow this to happen again in our community, because until the community says that, then it's going to continue happening. But if we say no more, as a community united, and remember, Corey was so special to so many people that we have come to find out. In his band, it was multicultural, he was representative. They said he never met a stranger. That's how he was. He was just a friendly soul. And so it really shouldn't be just about looking at the civil rights. This is about human rights. Corey had every right to continue to breathe and walk on this earth and live out the fulfillment of his destiny that God had for him. And but for this tragic, seemingly avoidance of not following the policies, not following the regulations, Corey Jones is dead.
Benjamin Crump. Up next, we will talk about it with our Powerhouse Roundtable. It is that time. We're going to take a closer look at the week's top news stories with our Powerhouse Roundtable. Some of the best and brightest who we invite to come in, analyze, and opine on the big stories of this week. And with us live in the studio this morning are Mark Caputo. He covers Florida politics for Politico, the go-to website for political news, and his Florida Daybook is must-reading for all of us political junkies. H.T. Smith, well-known, well-respected Miami attorney and professor of law at Florida International University. And Marlon Hill, our friend, making a return appearance, an attorney with Hamilton, Miller, and the Bertha Sal firm, and a radio broadcaster. To all of you, gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to have you come in. HT, I'm going to turn to you first because you are the senior attorney. Excuse me, Marlon, but you are the senior attorney, and you have been a public defender. You've prosecuted, you've defended many criminal cases. You teach law. Give us your first impression here of the Corey Jones case.
Well, first of all, one of my first jobs was representing the Public Safety Department, which was the name of the Miami-Dade Police Department back in the 1970s. I got a chance to see the best and the worst of law enforcement. Unfortunately, because of the fact that we only have the police officer's version of what happened, the version that Corey Jones have of what happened sleeps with him in the grave. And I have seen in the past that even when there are witnesses and physical evidence, nothing trumps the version of the police officer except the videotape. And even when there's a videotape, we've learned it does not mean the officer will be held accountable, as we saw in the Rodney Jones beating with the trial in Simi Valley.
We did. And Marlon, as we've also found out, and Mark just pointed out as we were listening here, there was no dash cam video. There was no body cam video of Officer Numan Raja. So the only version we're going to know about what happened, what allegedly happened, is from him.
And Corey's dead, you know. But any day sitting at the table with H.T. Smith is a good day. You know, we read, how many Coreys do we know? You know, there's so many questions that we have in these cases and no answers of another young black man that's dead. You know, for me, I get a sense, a very personal sense of, could this be my friend, my cousin, a family member, and another family is waking up on a Sunday morning, this happening a week ago, to have this type of grief. And it's just really frustrating, and it's really sad for me personally.
Well, I was at a black church in West Palm Beach on Friday night. I attended a town hall meeting. I heard person after person who knew this young man get up and talk about him, and I mean, he was a beloved young man. He was a person of real character, integrity. A member of his band, this Young Presidents, got up, who is white, about 30 years old, and said, we were a mixed band, and Corey never met somebody he didn't like. He was not a violent person, and really, aside from one brush with the law many years ago, he had no criminal record.
Yep. This is the kind of situation where everybody, black and white, young and old, can put themselves in Corey's position. Oftentimes we have cases where a person would not be in the position that the person who was killed was in. But here's a guy whose car broke down, and he's waiting for the tow truck to come. He's afraid to leave his car because it's filled with the expensive band equipment. And now someone comes up who's got tinted windows on his car, which is not a police car. He's not in a police uniform. He doesn't have his police gun. He doesn't have his police badge. And the guy approaches him. That's got to be fearful. And we know for a fact that Corey ran from the guy. He retreated. and he was killed. Shot 3 times, one in his left arm, once in his right arm, and the third in his heart. And that's what killed him.
This brings up a few things. Number one, it also shows that if you have a gun, that doesn't always keep you safe. In fact, it can put you in a worse situation. There's a possibility that the officer, again, unmarked, not wearing a uniform, pulled up on him, and this guy, out of self-defense, pulled his gun. It's a possibility. Right. Again, we're not there. Another thing is that on the civil side, if this happened privately, say if I or if one of you guys had gotten in this situation with Corey and shot him to death, Florida law essentially incentivizes us to do that now.
Stand your ground.
The Stand Your Ground law that Jeb Bush signed in 2005 removed what's called the duty to retreat. And it said that every man's space on the ground is his castle now. It expanded what's called the castle doctrine. Wow. Every man's home is his castle. So what it says is that you can use deadly force if you have a reasonable reason to do it. So if you shoot the other person dead, as George Zimmerman did in Trayvon Martin's case, George Zimmerman got acquitted. But if you fire a warning shot, you can wind up going to prison for 20 years. And we have 2 cases of that, a black woman, Marissa Alexander in Jacksonville, and a white guy named Orville Lee Wallard in the Lakeland area. Both these people are in prison. Orville Wallard's case is especially strange because he came up for clemency before Rick Scott, who recently signed a bill saying basically if you fire a warning shot, you get more of a break from the law. But Rick Scott turned down his clemency request, so this guy's in prison for 20 years, had no other record. There's something wrong with our laws and the way they're being interpreted and applied.
But what really disturbs me is this pattern that after this police shooting, the police release just enough information to have you see it from a frame that supports the police. So they always tell you if the person has a record, he violated some type of order, and the police were, the famous 4 words, feared for his safety. Now, the press and the people ask any other question. Where was the guy shot? Did you show him a badge? All of those things, and they said, we can't say anything until the investigation is complete. I watch, it will take a year. They will slow roll this investigation. A year before it comes, they will exonerate the officer and put him back.
Well, hopefully the FBI's involvement and maybe even the Department of Justice involvement.
But that doesn't mean it's going to hasten the length of the investigation.
No, but a brighter spotlight.
Even so, you've got no other witnesses. I just cannot see how the police officer, or really almost any Florida citizen now in our current laws, would be convicted in this case. I'm not saying he should be convicted or he shouldn't be convicted. I don't have the evidence. But I'm saying if you're the only guy who's left standing, thanks to Stand Your Ground, and certainly thanks to officer protections, you're going to go free.
HT, I need to ask you, here we have now the FBI joined the case, apparently at the request of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. So we have Dave Ehrenberg, the Palm Beach County State Attorney. He has his own investigators looking at this. Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, how do they coordinate the investigation? Do they do them independently? How should it work?
How should it work? It should be a coordinated investigation, but I can assure you that Ehrenberg has said, I'm conducting my own investigation. I don't need any help. He's going to do his investigation. The police and the FBI are going to do their investigation. That alone will slow it down and make it twice as long with twice the statements, twice the investigation. Those are the kind of things that we, the people, can change, along with the things that Crump made, like if a police officer is out and he doesn't have anything to identify him as a police officer, call and get a car there with a police officer so everybody knows who's who. And we wouldn't have a dead young man.
Body cameras and dashboard cameras.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely, Mark.
They are absolutely essential. They have been for a while, and you know, to the credit of at least the Miami-Dade County, the Mayor Carlos Jimenez, had put $1 million aside for body cameras. Now got another $1 million from the feds. So the Miami-Dade County Police Department is going to be using body cameras, even though the PBA is not happy.
And I'm happy that the police chief is also on board with using the body cameras.
One of the ironies I find with law enforcement and our current surveillance state, which goes all the way up to the federal level, is they love to monitor everything we do, our emails, our cell phones. They have cameras everywhere. But boy, if you try to record a police officer, they go nuts.
They watch us,
why.
but we can't watch them. Something's wrong with that picture.
There are many things wrong with the picture. All right, gentlemen, hold on. We have some other things to talk about, so stay with us. We'll be right back with our roundtable. Welcome back. Live in our studio this morning, we are with our roundtable. On my left is the estimable Marlon Hill, attorney, and Equally estimable, H.T. Smith, attorney, law professor, and Mark Caputo from Politico, Florida. And
somewhat estimable.
All right, I'll find an adjective for you. Mark, so was it 8, 9, 10 hours that Hillary Clinton was testifying before the House Benghazi Committee? And they tried, but I don't know that they laid a glove on her.
Well, the most telling statement was given by Trey Gowdy, the South Carolina representative who chaired the committee, who asked afterward, hey, what was new? What did you find? He's like, I'll have to look at the transcript. Like, wow, you didn't know? The best that seems to be circulating in conservative circles is that Hillary Clinton essentially acknowledged that she believed it was terrorist and it was a planned attack and not a spontaneous YouTube video-inspired attack, whereas in public she kind of adhered more to the Obama narrative that it might be the YouTube attack. So they're saying this is evidence of her lying. But on the whole, many conservatives worried that her going in there would actually help her. And if you monitor Twitter and you look at what they wrote afterward, they were proven right.
Yeah, it certainly appered to help her.
Yeah,
I mean,
because the biggest thing the Republicans had was trustworthiness. And I think the average person saw 11 hours where 12 people took turns asking questions, and one person for 11 hours answered them. Cool, calm, collective. And when I say answered them, let's say responded to them. Because some she intentionally did not answer.
She certainly did not. And there still remain questions which I think are legitimate about Benghazi, but I think that as a political topic, it's over.
The word that I have for her is resilience. You know,
good word.
You know, the bullseye is definitely on her back. I think that she is in it for the long run, and clearly, the more focus that they have on her shows her strength.
And also, it helps get votes. There is certainly an element of the Democratic Party, and this kind of circle back to what we were talking about earlier. You saw this with Bill Clinton. His support among African Americans actually skyrocketed when he got impeached. African Americans are a base of the Democratic Party, 27% of the primary vote here in Florida. If they see someone who's being unfairly treated, essentially by law enforcement,
they may come out to vote.
They're going to have a tendency to rally around that candidate.
Good point.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Jeb Bush, because this week he reorganized his campaign, cut down travel expenses, staff, and Mark, I just have to say, he's got to rejuvenate his campaign or it's over.
Yeah, you see a variety of things. Number one, this is like shakeup number 3 or 4. You know, they kept kind of paring back, but then when we, the media, or other people would say, hey, looks like you guys got a revenue problem and a spending problem, they would vociferously deny it. Everything's going great. So the problem that a donor told me with the Jeb Bush campaign is everything's going great until it's not. And then there's a shakeup, and then there's another shakeup, and then there's another shakeup. And it doesn't seem like the big decisions were made seriously soon enough, and now he's in a real tough spot.
Yeah. Well, this coming week, Marlon, in Texas, there's going to be a fundraiser and an event with George H.W. Bush, his father, venerable man, God bless him. And George W. Bush is going to be there as well. I mean, if a campaign were not in trouble, I don't think Jeb would appear with his brother.
Well, certainly we have a campaign with a logo with Jeb, the exclamation mark, and then we have now Jeb, the question mark. Now we have Jeb, the asterisk mark, because I think that he now really has to depend on his family's name and network and relationships that he has within the Republican Party establishment. He's really going to have to just open the doors and transparently tap into that. Otherwise, you know, he is definitely going to have some sort of Jeb 3.0, 4.0, or maybe 5.0.
Yeah.
And one of the problems is when he was asked about the shakeup, which is legitimate news, he said publicly, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, oh, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter. If you can't feed the army that you fielded, your army will not be effective enough to fight, and that's his problem.
Right, and I'm sorry, go ahead, H.T.
No, I was just going to say the Republican Party is really upset with the establishment of the Republican Party, and no one represents the establishment more than the last name Bush. Jeb. What comes after Jeb? Bush. John Ellis Bush. I think this is a kamikaze kind of tactic that he's taken, inviting his father, who is well loved, but George W. with him. This is like Hail Mary, and we'll see what happens.
If I could disagree, right now there's a possibility the best thing going for Jeb is the fact that he's a Bush. That helps bring money in over the transom. They did plan
but
these,
I think
these fundraisers a while ago.
H.T.'s point is, you know, the father is venerated. He's just a respected figure, but W is still, I mean...
In Republican circles, W is still liked. You have to understand that. Like, his approval ratings are higher now. Right. I mean, he left office with a 20% approval rating.
And the point I'm making is he had $100 million, and he's still 5th and 6th in most of the polls. And so let's say he raised another $100 million, because of his context, I don't see how it's going to take him to 1 or 2.
Whatever he does, he needs more oxygen for sure.
Well, he can't, and he can't raise another $100 million. That was done in coordination with what was called a super PAC.
Right.
Once he became a federal candidate, he could no longer coordinate with them.
Right. It's Mike Murphy, his man, who is running that. Well, it seems to me that he's got to get to New Hampshire.
Yes.
If he can get to New Hampshire, which is a crossover state, and Democrats, independents can vote in their primary, and he can do okay, then maybe the campaign goes on.
If you're banking on Democrats and independents as a Republican, you are sunk.
All right, well, talk about being sunk. Well, maybe not being sunk. Let's talk about Donald Trump. He went to Doral on Friday night. Gee, I'm sorry I couldn't have been there. But Marlene, one of the, to me, amazing things is in our report, and we're going to have one later in this program, a lot of people who are immigrants were there to applaud Donald Trump. It seems to me they are people who sort of want to pull the ladder up once they're here and say, no, we don't need any more immigrants, and they love the guy.
Well, he was on friendly grounds with the Trump National Resort, and he loves to hear us say that. He says that he's an outsider, but he's really a politician. If you listen very closely, he is telling people exactly what they would like to hear, and no substance there, really.
Well, he's telling people, I think he sounds decisive, and he is a superb salesman, a narcissist, an egotist, blustery, good
Again,
on
a
TV.
politician.
All right.
Well, what I like is every campaign stop, he tells everybody about how he's winning in the polls. He is huge. No, he doesn't say huge. Huge in the polls. And he came down, and they asked him about the poll recently in Iowa. He said, that poll is wrong. Don't count on that poll. They don't know what they're doing. He is really a very interesting person, and I think that he is really damaging the Republican brand. And we'll see in the election.
Will he be the nominee?
He will not be the nominee, but he will have done so much damage. I said one time when I was here, he is putting skunk juice on the Republican brand. You can't get skunk juice out of the fabric.
With an umbrella.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Trump, in the way he communicates, unlike anyone else, is that he says, America, we're going to win again.
Yes.
And it's an appealing message.
Right.
And on that point, we are going to have to end it. But gentlemen, thanks. Always great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thank you. All right, so to come, Trump's big trip to the Sunshine State. There he is in Doral. We will take a closer look at his trip out to Doral on Friday night.
You know, Mr. Trump, if you could do the same for the United States as you did here, it would be unbelievable. Unbelievable.
That is the Donald making his first campaign foray into South Florida. Trump held a campaign event Friday evening in Doral at, of course, the Trump National Doral. A news crew from next-door neighbor Univision was invited out of that event. Trump and Univision are at odds, but there was plenty of love in that room, according to Local 10 News reporter Amy Viteri.
Supporters rushed the stage at the Trump National Resort in Doral, everyone wanting a moment face-to-face with Donald Trump.
He stands for everything I believe. He stands for everything this country believes, and this country needs Donald Trump.
Donald's on my phone. I'm so happy.
Danton Enriquez scored a Trump autograph on his cell phone. The Republican candidate took the stage around 7:20 and immediately talked about his connection with South Florida.
Is there nothing like Miami? Nothing. Nothing.
Trump showed less affection for Spanish-language network Univision. When crews arrived, they were not allowed to cover the event. Their truck stayed just off property. Trump's campaign explains it would be a conflict of interest as Trump is currently suing Univision for $500 million.
No Trump! No Trump!
Demonstrators rallied outside, pushing back against what they feel is Trump's anti-immigrant stance. Opposition made it inside the event, too.
Go ahead, get him out.
Trump had to pause several times as security pushed out demonstrators.
See, the first group, I was nice. Oh, take your time. The second group, I was pretty nice. The third group, I'll be a little more violent. And the fourth group, I'll say, get the hell out of here.
He didn't shy away from talking immigration policy and had plenty of support from the South Florida crowd.
Let me tell you, who wants to stop illegal immigration more than anybody? The Hispanics that are in our country legally. It's true.
That's what supporters told us they want, including several who immigrated to the U.S.
And if we're not careful, what I came here for is not going to be here anymore.
That was Amy Viteri reporting. Yesterday, Donald Trump held a big rally in Jacksonville.
The most recent poll shows him leading the GOP field in Florida. Still to come, my personal perspective about the death of Corey Jones and why the gun he had with him probably was a contributing factor. A live look now from our Fort Lauderdale cam, and here is Weather Authority meteorologist Jennifer Correa with your Sunday forecast.
Good afternoon, Michael, and good afternoon, South Florida. We had a few passing showers early in the morning, and then it really did clear out. But as we continue on through the afternoon hours, a couple more of these showers will develop, not only offshore, but inland as well. This is what the in-house model is depicting by 1 o'clock. A lot of these showers will be far to the west of us, but the coast could get some here and there, even down through the Keys. Can't completely rule out these showers. We'll have that in store as a 20% chance for rainfall continuing on for the rest of today. High rip current risk will remain in effect, and there'll be a breezy one out there. Also, small craft operators continue to exercise that caution. East breeze over the waters, 10 to 15 miles per hour. Seas between 2 to 4 feet. The bays with a moderate chop. By the middle part of the afternoon hours, we'll hit a high of 86 degrees, which is typical for this time of year. Not much in our weather pattern will change, but we have a cold front that's headed our way to end the month of October. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Jennifer, thanks. All right, before we leave you today, a personal perspective about the death of Corey Jones. It's terribly sad and also mystifying. Why did this 31-year-old drummer, building inspector, son, and friend of many have to die in a hail of police bullets? There's only one person who knows the answer. His name is Numan Raja, a police officer with the Palm Beach Gardens PD. He has given a statement about the shooting, but it will likely be months or longer before we hear his side of the story. We will never hear Corey Jones's side, and that is a tragedy. But let's consider the facts as we know them. Jones's car breaks down as he's coming home from a gig in Jupiter. He pulls off I-95, calls a friend who briefly joins him at the scene. Jones calls for a tow truck and waits. Then along comes an unmarked van with tinted windows driven by an undercover cop from Palm Beach Gardens Police. The cop gets out of the van, approaches Jones's stopped vehicle. Jones has a pistol, which he purchased legally, also had a concealed weapons permit. He sees a man dressed in jeans and a T-shirt walking towards his car. He is scared, steps out of his car, probably with his gun. The cop sees it and then apparently fires in self-defense. Now, that's just speculation. Let's wait to get all the facts before we pass judgment. This much we know for sure. Officer Raja did not have his badge with him, didn't call a marked police cruiser for backup, evidently didn't run the plate on Jones's car. These are all violations of standard police protocol for an incident like this one. And those violations contributed to the death of a man who had done nothing wrong, who was an upstanding citizen, a beloved son, a friend, a guy who played in a band made up of black and white musicians and also played at his church. We will await the results of the investigation, but it simply cannot drag on forever. The Jones family deserves answers. We all do. Black lives matter. Corey Jones's life mattered. His death and all the deaths like it simply have to stop. That is my perspective for this week. Hope you have a great Sunday. And remember, as always, stay informed, get involved. We'll see you next Sunday, hopefully with the candidates for Miami Beach Mayor. Have a great Sunday.